Why do you think the work that women do impacts their lives as much as you're detailing when it comes to trying to move forward in it from a healthy perspective then?
I think because, look, when you look at men, they don't go through that. They might go through other midlife changes, but their physical body doesn't, like women are losing estrogen. The moment the estrogen starts dropping, it affects your brain function. It affects other physical functions of the body. Sleep is one thing, and so I think there's there's the idea already that there's a physical impact that you can't control, that you can try to manage with things like HRT or other things. And some women can't take HRT. They've got history of cancers or things like that, so they can't take that. So they've got to find other ways to manage it. And the compounding of this physical stress, lack of sleep, brain fog, all of this contributes to a woman then really struggling with day-to-day life, day-to-day professional life, especially if she's in a very busy, high-powered role. And then the other thing is women are competing in environments where it is still quite male-dominated, right? No matter what they say, there is still gender pay gaps and things in the workplace. And most of the top positions are still held by men. So women are still fighting for their place. They're still fighting for equity. Now, we've come a long way since 50 years ago, but we aren't 100% there, right? We don't have 50-50 equity. That just doesn't exist. And so I think that's why it's difficult for women. And then women also have the other thing, we mothers, and we carry this mom guilt thing as well. So we don't put ourselves first on our priority list. We put the children and the partner and the whole family unit first. And so there's all of that impacts all these different decisions that we need to make. So it is a lot harder for women. And I remember when I was going through it feeling, my God, they're going to think I'm just incompetent. And I knew I wasn't. I had delivered many, many huge, high priority, CEO priority projects. So my history spoke for itself. But suddenly I hit this phase and I'm like, my brain is mush, and I'm just doubting myself and doubting my own abilities. And it takes something to climb out of that, and that's why, for me, I say it's important to identify what you're good at. So do you rebuild the confidence, but also to look at the overall health factor. Like, what do I need to do for my life at this stage that's going to have the least impact on my health? Because if we don't take care of our health, we don't have wealth for long. Health is wealth. It's an old saying, it's a cliche, but it's true. Without your health, even if you had all the money in the world, you can't stop what's happened. You talk to Steve Jobs about that. He would have given anything to stop the pancreatic cancer. He had all the money, one of the richest people at the time. And health is wealth. If you don't have your health, nothing else matters. You can accomplish very little, or your lifespan is very short.
I look
So,
at my girlfriend and she struggles with finding a balance when it comes to work. She worked as she did work long, long hours when we first got together. And I always used to ask her, I was like, hey, you know what? You're always tired. You're feeling sick. You're feeling run down. You're feeling burnt out. Like, you don't need to be working 10, 11, 12, 13 hours at your job, because if something were to happen to you, there'd be people that would feel bad, but they would replace you because the company has to go forward, right? In a heartbeat. And one thing I shared with her is I was like, okay, let me test this Wendy a little bit, right? Let me test how much of a stranglehold it has on her, right? I said, if I were to win the lottery today, $100 million, we don't have to
mm,
work ever again, right? I don't have to work, and you don't have to work because we're together. I was like, would you quit your job and we would just live life as millionaires? She was like, I was like, I would probably still work. And I'm like, why? I'm like, do you see your job has such a hold on you that even if you were rich, even if you were with someone that was rich, that we're planning to spend the rest of our lives together, you actually had to take a moment to think
Mm,
if you would quit your job if you had access to $100 million. And you raise a good point where me as a man now, I'm gone.
mm.
Right? I give my 2 weeks.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm gone, right? And then she turns around, she's like, well, what if I won $100 million? Would you retire? I was like, yes. Why
Mm,
why wouldn't I? Like, why would you'd be at home doing what? Traveling without me? That doesn't make sense, right? But
mm.
because she's only known work and
Yep.
it's so ingrained in her identity as a woman, as a person, she at that point in time, this was last year, she couldn't see life without work. To your
Mm.
point, right? So if you had someone that came to that situation and they came to this said, Wendy, I don't know who I am. I don't know what life looks like without work. How would you speak to them, or what advice would you give them at that point?
Well, for me, I have always tried to look for balance. Now, we don't get balance in life. I know people go for this work-life balance, and it's a kind of a phrase that people throw around, but it doesn't actually pan out in reality. We always sometimes, when things require it, we either putting a lot of time into private life, because say, for example, if someone's sick, if your parent is sick or your a sibling is sick, you may need to take time off to go and care for that person. So now suddenly the work is on the back burner, the family life, the personal life is a priority. The reverse is true. You could be delivering great projects, and to your girlfriend's case, she's working these long hours because she feels she has to. And one of the reasons that women do work so hard is because um, they've had to get even iota of the opportunities that are sometimes afforded to men. Or even in my case, as a biracial woman, had to work twice as hard to just get opportunities that were afforded to white people, right? So there's sometimes these factors that, and then what happens is, so if that starts happening at a very young age for you, I think it becomes ingrained in you, and it's your automatic way of being. And it's going to take a lot of reprogramming to undo the automatic way of being. I mean, because for me, when I needed to make that extra 20 grand, it was all about I've got to survive and take care of my daughter. But then I would look at the baby and I was like, but I also want to be a really good mom. So I went through, as I said, writing has always been the thing that helps me clarify and process things that I'm struggling with. So I would write in my journals and write out, well, how can I be a really good mom, but also be really good at my work? And that was when I started negotiating those interviews. But the person has to define that balance for themselves. They have to figure out why they're being driven by that. And there again, sometimes it's just a case of doing these personality tests. There's lots of them around on the internet you can do for free. But in some cases, if it's quite severe and the person is so driven by work that they can't actually create balance, they might need external help or an expert help in trying to figure out what is the motivating factor. Because usually when you're that driven, underneath it is a fear. There's a fear of something. And the fear could be the fear of poverty.